Hey guys, it's Ben here from Find a Way Photography. I just wanted to do a quick review and a quick tour around Aurora HDR. It's a program that I've been using to put photos together into HDR for quite a while now, and I really like it. So I thought I'd give you a quick tour around and show you some of the things I like and don't like. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at this photo here. So as you can see, it's actually three different photos, and we're going to merge them together. So that's the point of HDR, is you have a properly exposed one right here, a little bit darker, which kind of gets that sky looking good, and then a lighter one, which kind of gets that foreground. And we merge the three of them together, and we kind of get the best of the three photos, and we make something out of that. And that's what HDR is. And the program that I've been using is Aurora HDR. So we'll take a look at that. Before we go over into Aurora, I just wanted to quickly say, if you're watching this on YouTube, I've got a link below for a full written tutorial that I've done. Otherwise, you're probably on my website already and you've already found that. I've also got some links to if you want to buy the software or you want to do a trial of it, that sort of thing. And the links are affiliate links, so that means that if you click on that and you end up buying the software, I get a little bit of money from that, but it doesn't cost you anything extra and that sort of thing. So if you end up doing that, that would be super sweet. So this is the photo that we're going to do, and we're in Lightroom right now. All that I do from here, let's get out a full screen so we can see the menu at the bottom. So I'm going to select the three of them, and I just drag them down here onto the icon, and that makes it super simple and easy. And then I click alignment. So as soon as you pop them into Aurora HDR, it pops up with this window. It's showing you the three that you're aligning. You can X out any of the ones that you don't want if you've made a mistake for some reason. But we've got the ones here that we want. Alignment, and then we'll also pop into additional settings. So in this photo, it's not the perfect photo, because you can see down here we've actually got some people that were standing in the way. They've kind of blurred themselves across the bottom of the photo in some of the other ones. So let's see if we can turn on ghost reduction, which is basically because we're merging three different photos together, sometimes you have something moving through each of the frames that's in a different spot, like a car or people or that sort of thing. And ghost reduction tries to pick one of the frames. So in this case, we're going to do the middle frame, this one here, and it uses that as a reference. And if something has moved through each of the other frames, but it's not in this one, it'll eliminate it. And then we'll actually go high, see if we can get rid of that. Might as well turn on some color denoise and some chromatic aberration. Might as well, because we're kind of shooting towards the sun, so who knows, there might be something in there. Those just take a little bit more, cause it to take a little bit longer to load, but I'm not too phased about that. And then it pops up into the full Aurora HDR window, which looks like this. And it takes a little bit to merge them together, but once it's there, then we're good to go. And Aurora HDR, just one thing I'll quickly mention is it doesn't have a full cataloging feature or anything like that. And that's why I still organize all my photos in Lightroom. As you can see here, on the side, I've got all my organization done in Lightroom. But when I do want to do an HDR, you can do it right from Lightroom, photo merge into HDR, but it doesn't give quite the full effect. And so having a dedicated piece of software like Aurora makes a huge difference. I used to use a program called Photomatics, which you can see down here, Photomatics Pro 5, and that was kind of the common one that everyone used for a really long time. But it was always clunky and slow, and you always got kind of a shitty result from it. So now that Aurora HDR is out, Machphun released this not that long ago, and I'm using the 2017 version, and it really is phenomenal. It's got all these, tons and tons of control. It's laid out very similar to Lightroom, and it's a really good program, and I love using it. And I've always liked doing HDR photos. They're a lot of fun, and so having finally a good piece of software to do it in is pretty awesome. The other thing I'll quickly mention before we get into it is that there is another version coming out as of when I'm recording this right now. There's another version coming out, Aurora HDR 2018, which is going to be released middle of September of 2017. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So as soon as that one comes out, I'll do a quick update, hopefully, and show you some of the things that have changed and that sort of thing. But as for the review of Aurora HDR, I think this will give you a general idea. And all I'm going to do here is go through this photo, edit it, show you what I do, which is going to give you kind of a quick tour of everything in Aurora HDR so that you can see it for yourself. And then you can download the program, try it yourself. I think there's a 30-day free trial, so I highly recommend doing that, giving it a shot. And then if you're anything like me, I think you'll definitely go ahead and pick it up for yourself, because it really is awesome. And then I always like to give a quick story behind photos when I post them and edit them and that sort of thing. And so just a really quick one to give you a background on what's going on in this photo. This is in Iceland, and it's just kind of northwest of Reykjavik. I went there in the summer of 2016 with a friend of mine, Ryan, and it's such an incredible place, so cool, and I can't wait to go back. And this is one of the first places that we stopped. And this mountain in the back is called Kirkjufell. And then the waterfall itself is called Kirkjufell Foss, because that's Foss is kind of, I guess, Icelandic for waterfall. And this mountain, if you've seen the latest season of Game of Thrones, I think it was season 7. In a couple of the episodes, they actually have this mountain in the background when they're off fighting the White Walkers and doing that sort of stuff. So yeah, super famous spot in Iceland, and it's quite a cool spot for a good reason. And this is the top waterfall. There's another waterfall just to the right, and then the ocean is just along. This is right on the coast, and the ocean is just on the other side of this mountain. It's a pretty cool spot, and this is at sunset. And so let's get into it, and that's why the sky is super nice and lots of color and that sort of thing. You see the sun setting just behind. And being high summer, the sun actually set, and then so this was around midnight. It was quite late because it's so far north. The sun set, and it was actually there's color in the sky all the way until sunrise around 5 in the morning or 2 in the morning, something like that. Sometime early in the morning, and there's color in the sky because the sun set here, and it rose just over here. It was pretty much light all night, which was quite cool. Anyways, starting at the top, what we've got here is kind of the, all sorts of adjustments and sliders and that sort of thing we can play with. Right above that, we've got layers. So right now we're working on just the single image, or single layer of the original image, but you can go here and you can add different layers and that sort of thing. And then you've got the histogram above it. If you want to do any luminosity masking, this is where you do it. That's a really cool feature. I'll get into that later on. You've got a few things here, which let you just change kind of what's displayed and that sort of thing. Hides the histogram, hides layers. And then you can also add presets at the bottom, but I like to hide those because I don't use that often. And then along the top, you've got crop buttons, you've got brushing options, you've got undo or redo buttons. It has some information about the file, as well as the EXIF data and kind of which photos you've combined and that sort of thing. It tells you a lot about that. You've got options to save and export. You can export to Luminar and stuff like that right there. And then these are your zoom in, zoom out buttons, and kind of go back to full screen. And then you've got these ones are really cool. This just lets you gives you a before and after, and I think it shows you the middle frame, so that properly exposed one is showing you a reference to that, and then you can kind of slide it back and forth. We haven't done anything, but you can still see the difference between the original file, if we had just edited that, compared to the combined file. And then you can also put them side by side, which is my preference usually. Cool. So that's a quick kind of overview of how it's laid out. So now we'll go through the tools and the sliders, and I'll kind of talk you through how I would edit a typical photo. The first one is, HDRs have a kind of a standard look to them, and lots of people don't like them. And that's because a lot of HDRs are usually overdone. Machphun's made it really easy, and they have an HDR look button or slider right off the bat. So if you don't like the HDR look, you can actually turn it down and kind of make it more like a natural photo. Or you can crank it up and give you that typical HDR photo that, that might look familiar from a lot of HDR photos that you've seen before. But I usually actually like to turn it down just a little bit or leave it where it is. And then exposure, looking at the histogram, it is underexposed, but I do kind of like the dark, moody feel of it. So I'm going to crank up the exposure a little bit, but not too much. And then let's bring up those shadows a little bit. Again, not too much. And then maybe we'll bring up the highlights a bit. Smart tone is a really fun slider. It basically, if you want to brighten things or if you want to make them darker, Smart tone does a good job of just kind of doing a little bit of everything. It's kind of like exposure, but not quite as, it doesn't just do one thing and crank it up. It kind of takes into account the highlights, the shadows, and everything at once. And so it's a little bit smarter than just exposure, I guess. Let's bring those blacks down a little bit, and then see if we can bring out a bit of the light in the waterfall and that sort of thing. So we'll bring the whites up just a bit. Color temperature, I usually play around with that a little bit just to see if I like warmer or cooler any better, but in this case it was actually pretty good. And the tint's actually quite good as well, so we won't do that. Vibrance we'll add a bit, so if you go all the way up to 100, you can kind of see the colors that you have available. So you've got lots of blue in the sky, tons of green, which is just kind of a standard Iceland thing. There's green colors everywhere, so and then some yellow from the sunset. So we definitely want to bring out some of those green colors and some of the blue from the sky, and we can isolate those a little bit later. Obviously going up to 100 is a little bit overkill, but something like that for now I think is going to be pretty good. And then might just add in a bit of color contrast as well. Perfect. The next, this whole panel here is called structure, and that, you've got all these details and clarity and structure within there, and this is kind of just affecting kind of the overall look of the photo. So I like to be quite careful here, because going a little bit too far can definitely overdo it, but I do like how that clarity, and if we were to increase the structure and maybe some detail, I do like what it's doing to this mountain, but everything else is way too much. So what I'm going to do in this case is reset these. We'll add a little bit, but we'll come back later and we'll just address this mountain, and we'll do that with layers. So if you're wondering what layers does, we'll take a look at that in a minute. But the rest of the photo could use a little bit, just not quite as much as just the mountain itself. And then this structure, I actually sometimes like to bring this down and soften up the photo a bit. And so I think that makes the sky and down here look a little bit better. And then you can also kind of fine-tune different areas of that. So just the softness, and then you can fine-tune the boost as well. Cool. And we'll maybe add just a little bit of detail, but not too much. And then you've got a whole area here where you can do noise reduction, or denoise as they call it. I'm going to skip over that. I'm not too worried about that in this one. If you're going to print it or spend a bit more time on the photo, that's a good one to play with. And same with the details down here. I'm not going to do much with that right now. It's just kind of a sharpening feature, so we won't worry about that too much right now. But image radiance is one of my favorite sliders. And so, and I'll show you what it does. It kind of gives the whole photo this fairy tale look. So if we crank it all the way up, you can see it kind of softens everything and gives it a cool color and that sort of thing. So that one is actually a lot of fun. And for this photo, I think something like that looks quite cool. And we'll add a little bit of softness and then brightness. Don't think we really need to play around with that too much. And then we'll possibly add a bit more color. See what that does. So just kind of a subtle little extra color mostly in those highlight areas. And warmth, I think we'll leave that as it is. Polarizing filter is a cool one as well. It actually does a really good job of mimicking what an actual polarizer would do. Obviously, lots of people put polarizing filters on to cut reflections in lakes and that sort of thing. And it's not going to do that, but it will kind of add that contrast and that sort of thing to the sky, and cuts glare and that sort of thing. And it does do a good job of that. As you can see, it's just like putting a polarizing filter on the end of your lens and then turning it around to kind of turn it on and off, so you can see what it does there. And again, we'll skip over details and getting into glow. And I don't think we really want to add glow in this one. It kind of makes things a little bit messy and bleeds those highlights over into the shadows. And in this case, I don't think it really needs it, so we'll leave it as is. This is a cool area as well. You can make different exposure, contrast, vibrance, and temperature adjustments to the top and the bottom separate. So there's the top, there's the bottom, and then you can change how, kind of where the top and the bottom meet. So you can feather out the layer between the top and the bottom. You can shift it up and down, and then you can also rotate it side to side. And so it's kind of like putting graduated filters, but you're doing two at once, and it gives so it's not super useful, and it's not something that you couldn't do with the other tools available, but it is nice and handy just to have if you want to make a quick adjustment just to the top or the bottom, or do a little bit of different stuff on each. But in this case, we'll skip over that. I'm pretty happy with how that is. And then you've got a standard tone curve here. So you can do contrast adjustments, and you can affect each of the colors individually. We might use this just to brighten up those highlights a little bit. I might just brighten up the shadows a hair as well. And then on all of these panels, you also have a little orange button here where you can turn it on and off and see what the effect was. All right, so I think something like that. Just a kind of subtle lift of the highlights and a little bit of a drop in the shadows to give it a bit of extra contrast. Something like that. I'm also going to go up here and just lift the blacks a little bit. Lots of those are getting cut off there. And then I might also just lift up the shadows just a little bit, just so we can see kind of what's going on down here. We still want the dark in the foreground and light in the top because it looks a little bit more natural, but we'll just lift it a bit so you can see what's going on. And then you have your hue, saturation, and luminance panel, just like Lightroom and other kind of editing software. It's a pretty standard one. So this is where we could affect each of the individual colors. So in this case, let's see what a bit of extra blue. The blue looks good in the sky, but down here in the water, it does a little bit too much. So what we'll do is we'll kind of get this set for the sky right now. We'll come back and do this later on. And the other thing I'll quickly mention is we still have these people down here. One option would be just to crop them out. Unfortunately, there's no spot removal tool in Aurora HDR, so I'm not able to try to remove them in Aurora. But I could move it back to Lightroom and then put it into Photoshop or something like that, and I could easily get rid of them. But just so you know, I'm not ignoring them, but Aurora doesn't have anything right now that can sort that out. Hopefully that appears in the next version of the software, which I'm expecting it to. And then that would possibly give you something to try to remove those in right in this program. And then let's take a look and see what the yellows are doing. So maybe a bit of yellow saturation. Green is quite quite vibrant already, so I don't think we need much there. This is your color toning or split toning. So there's a bunch of preset options here where you can kind of click through these, and it gives the highlights and the shadows a different tone. And you can see they do have a pretty dramatic effect. Some of them are quite cool, but in this case I think I'm going to leave it as is and just leave it as that standard without any toning done. But it is a cool option to have. And then the very last thing you can do is a bit of vignetting. And we'll see. Don't want to do too much, but we'll definitely darken the corners a bit, just to kind of bring the focus into the main area. There are some different options you can do within vignetting. You can change the size of the vignette, which is cool. So you can bring it further in. You can change the shape of it and the feather. And then you can also go and brighten up the middle of it, which is a cool feature. So darken the corners, brighten the middle, something like that. And then you can, what I really like in the Aurora version is you can change where the center of it is. So in Lightroom and stuff like that, it always just goes around the center. But in this one, you could actually change the center. Instead of being right here, maybe the center starts down there, so it kind of brings in a little bit more shadows in here and a little bit less down there. Or you can place the center up here. Does the same thing. So that's kind of a cool feature as well. And then you just have some layer options where you could, because we're working on this single layer, you can change the opacity and how it's blended in with all the other ones. Cool, so that's a good start. So that gives you your base edit. And now this is where the layers come in. So now we can add a new layer. And in this one in particular, we're going to be working on just the mountain. So let's just add that here. So on this one, we're going to be, just looking at the mountain. We had talked about going down into structure and maybe adding a bit of clarity. And maybe a bit of structure, not too much. And then just a bit of detail. And we'll see, we can always come back and change this later on. But let's see how this does for a start. So right now I've affected the whole picture, but I only want to isolate the mountain. So clicking on this layer, now we're going to click up here on brush, and that's going to create a layer mask, which lets me just brush in the area that I want this to affect. We've got some brush options here. So this is to add, and you can see the little plus sign in the middle of the brush. You can also change to the subtract one. So if you brushed a little bit too much and you want to remove some, that's the one to do. And you can also hit X, which switches between them. You can change all your brush options here, so make it bigger or smaller. You can also use the square brackets on the keyboard to change that, which is nice and handy. The opacity, it's always set to 50 when you click a new brush. In this case, we'll go a little bit higher, and then we'll reduce the softness so we get kind of a harder brush. And then there's all of these different options down here as well. So lots to play with. One thing that I mentioned in my full review is that this brush in Aurora HDR is missing the auto mask that we have in photos like Lightroom. And that basically lets you paint over at a hard edge like this, and it will isolate the brush just to within that hard edge. And unfortunately that's missing in Aurora HDR, but maybe in the future. It is a really handy feature to have, and I was hoping to see it. I was quite disappointed when it wasn't part of this brush, but that's alright. Definitely something that Machphun could include in Aurora in the future to make it a little bit better, so hopefully we see something like that. And now we've got our brush, we've got the adjustments made. It's still to the whole photo, so now I just click and start brushing, and you'll see those photos that I made there, the changes that I made to the photo are now just being applied where I brush. Cool. And then we'll make it a little bit smaller just to get these fine details on the side and up at the top here. Cool. And you can see what's happened. So on this layer now, everything that's black is being hidden. Everything that's white is what's kind of showing through from the adjustments that we've made. So you can see the only parts that are being affected are just the mountain here. So if I turn this off, you can see nothing else changes. It's only what we've brushed in. That's probably a little bit too much of an adjustment, so let's just back that off a bit. Cool, and I think that looks quite good. We'll add another one and we'll just look at the waterfall on the bottom section here. So another adjustment layer, and we'll call this one waterfall. And then the same thing. This one we'll do it a little bit in reverse. So I've already got my brush out. I haven't made any changes, but let's just isolate just the waterfall, the part that we want to affect. And then I'll show you how we can just make the changes and see exactly what's happening. So something like that. I think we'll get a little bit down in the water as well. We'll change the opacity and just kind of feather it out. And just do a light brush down there. And you can see how it's the lighter gray areas is the light brushing. Everything that's white is showing through a little bit more heavy. And so we'll go back down to the HSL panel and we'll just take the blue down a little bit to give that the water kind of more of a white natural color. And then while we're here, let's see what Smart Tone does. So just brighten things up just a little bit. And maybe just a bit of contrast. Cool, so something like that. And now if we go and we click this orange button to turn the layer off, you can see the change that we've made. So we've just taken that blue color out and just given it a bit of extra brightness. And I think this is it's actually looking quite good. One thing that we haven't done yet is a crop, and that's just this tool up here. So you click the scissors and it gives you this preview. It takes a little bit to load, and that's one of my complaints about Aurora HDR is that it always seems to be kind of loading and reloading, and there's some lag in between kind of using some of the sliders and that sort of thing. And it's, it's possible that that's something that'll keep improving with new releases that come out, but as of now it is a little bit slow from time to time. And so I'm just going to bring in just the bottom of that a little bit, which leaves us less to cut out of those people later on. And there's lots of sky, and I do like that, but I'll just bring it in just a hair, just to give it a bit of a wider kind of look. And then you just hit apply. And you can also, there's not much of a horizon here to reference, but you could also kind of give this a quick turn one way or the other if you thought that it wasn't quite straight. So applies the crop, and takes a little bit to load, and then we're back into it. Alright, so that gives you a quick tour of kind of the layout of Aurora HDR, what some of the sliders do, and how I kind of work through the sliders and process a photo. And then it gives you also a quick look into the different layers and how you can use them. The last thing I would like to show you is just luminosity masking, which is really cool. So we're not, I don't really have much of a use for it right now, but if, say, we wanted to just affect the sky, what you could do is I've added a layer, you come up here to the histogram, and this is going to let you isolate different areas just by clicking on the area of the histogram that you want to affect. So say we want to affect the bright areas. That's going to be maybe 8, maybe this section 9, and you can see it slowly kind of building up a mask based on what we've clicked. So far we've just got the bright areas. 10 is probably going to do the rest of that. This area here might be, if we wanted to affect that, might be layer 7. And so we've pretty much got the whole sky based on its brightness, but we haven't done anything down here. So it's given me a perfect isolation of the top part. Let's see, what does number 6 give us? And number 5. So number 5 is starting to creep into kind of those areas on the mountain and that sort of thing. So let's get rid of that. So if we only wanted to affect the sky, we've pretty much got it right here. So let's go create Luminosity Mask. It takes a little bit to load, and then we're going to have a mask just based on these bright sections, which is super, super cool and really handy and helpful. And the way that you do it, no other program that I've ever used is able to do that so quick and easy. You can do it in Photoshop and that sort of thing, but it's definitely more of a hassle. And so let's just let's see what we end up with here, and then I'll show you how we can make some adjustments and just affect that area that we've isolated. It does take a little bit to load, which is, again, you know, the program is a little bit slow. I wouldn't edit every single photo of mine in Aurora HDR because I do find it quite slow, and doing a lot of them is a lot faster in something like Lightroom. But for every now and then, when you have a bracketed photo like this one that you want to spend some time on, Aurora HDR is really cool, and you can get some pretty cool results out of it. And so that now has, because I was selected on layer 3, which is a new layer I created, and I've created a luminosity mask on that layer. This is where we would affect all of those changes. So this would be your luminosity for the sky. And so if we wanted to, say, brighten up the sky, maybe with some smart toning, we could do that. Or if we wanted to make it darker, if we wanted to make the sky a little bit more of a blue color or warm it up, if we wanted to add some saturation into the sky and that sort of thing, the luminosity mask would let you do that, and it just affects only those areas, and it's by brightness. So the brighter the area, the more it'll be affected. So in this case, though, we're going to leave that, so I would just X that out. So that's the final photo. From here, what I usually do is I go up here and I go File, Save, Save As, and I'll show you where I save them. I just have a photo on my, or a folder on my hard drive where I keep all of the HDR photos, and it's called HDRs from Aurora, and that's my default folder. So as soon as I save this, I don't change the file name or anything. I just let it jump right into that, and then if I ever want to look for them, I know exactly where they've gone. So that saves it there. Takes just a couple of minutes, and then once we're done with that, it's nice to, I keep all my photos in Lightroom, so it's nice to just move them back into Lightroom quick, which is just right here, and you go Open In. You've got all these different options, but I go Open in Lightroom, and you'll see it'll just zip us from here. It'll take everything that we've done to the photo here. It'll just move us quickly over into Lightroom. And that's where our journey would end. If this was a photo that I was doing and wanted to spend a bit more time on, I would probably move it into Photoshop and eliminate, get rid of those people down there. Maybe do a final quick little adjustment in Lightroom just to tweak any little things that I wanted to do some final changes on, like sharpening and that sort of thing. And then if I ever wanted to find the photo, it's going to be right here in Lightroom. So all I do here is you click that photo, it's going to put it into your catalog, and you hit import. And that's it. So now we have the photo in Lightroom, and that's where it finishes. And so going back to what we were doing before, let's go. I just want to show you a quick before and after. So here's the previous one that we just did. So I'll add it into that folder. And you can see, so here's the final photo here. So that's what we've been working on. And here are the 3 photos that we merged together. So you can see how dramatic of a result you get by combining them, and you just get all these colors and all sorts of light to play with and that sort of thing. So that's the advantage of doing an HDR photo. And finally, now there's a program that lets you do it with tons of control, which gets you a really cool result. So I'm really excited about using Aurora HDR, and I hope that you will be as well. So thanks for joining me today. Hope you enjoyed that quick tour of Aurora. Again, check out my full review on my website. I'll put a link down below if you're watching this on YouTube. There's some links down there as well if you want to click them and buy Aurora for yourself. They are affiliate links, so I get a little bit of money, but it doesn't cost you anything extra. Cool. So thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.